When James Gunn took over the DCU, well, we were hearing a lot about video games, and now we've got a bit of an update and the developmental status of some of these games that will directly tie to the bigger DC universe. Let's break it down. Now, before we do that though, make sure you hit that like and subscribe button and ring the bell for all the updates. We do daily Marvel and DC videos, and we want to be your place for all the superhero news, but we want to do it truthfully and transparently so you are really in the know. Now, recently, the president of Warner Bros. Interactive Entertainment, David Haddad, was cheerleading in how, the Harry Potter Hogwarts game did over the last year. The game sold over 22 million copies in 2023, and he seemed quite proud of how well it resonated with fans. Now, we know that Suicide Squad, Kill the Justice League, Multiverses, and Wonder Woman are coming from Monolith. He did actually address WB Games and how they are indeed working on video games that will tie directly to James Gunn and Peter Safran's DCU. Now, in that same interview, he said, "A very consistent message coming from the executive layer of Warner Bros. Discovery is the importance of franchises. There's a unique and important role games have in keeping our franchises relevant, resonant, and exciting because there's plenty of fans and plenty of people consuming content where games are their starting point. It's their preferred form of content." Now, this is the first real indication that Warner Bros. Video Games division are indeed diving in and supporting James Gunn's grander plan to build a cinematic universe that spans all forms of mediums, including video games. Now, when Chapter 1 Gods and Monsters was first announced, James Gunn actually said, and I quote, "What we are doing with the DCU is we're having animation tied directly into live action. Television, movies, and games all intertwine within the same universe." Now, to be very clear though, Haddad understandably kind of declined to get into specifics on DCU video games. He is a C-level executive and knows these traps very well. But given the diverse slate of Chapter 1, there are some pretty big possibilities. First and foremost, you have to wonder if there's a Superman Legacy game secretly in development that he absolutely would not talk about. Also, another strong possibility could be one to tie into Batman Brave and the Bold, or even Peacemaker, who would really fit nicely into a sort of third or first-person shooter game. Interestingly enough, when he made this statement, it did not take long for fans to start asking James Gunn on social media. And if you're following James Gunn, you know that he is answering questions on Threads. Now, somebody actually asked him if some of these games would be AAA games, which in industry is an informal classification to classify video games produced by mid-size or, more importantly, major publishers. He was actually asked, "Hey, James, just a small doubt. When you said there are actual big games in the DCU, are they movie tie-in games or actual AAA games? And are you guys started working it? Is there a specific reason that you guys are making DCU games?" Now, Gunn replied pretty simply, confirming these are AAA games, and they are solely yes for fun. Now, he couldn't give it a more ambiguous answer because most games are made for fun, and he didn't really make it very clear whether they would be directly movie tie-ins or just games set in their own story within that same world. We know Gunn likes to open the doors to other franchises, and I do suspect some games in development will indeed be that. But I also think whatever grander storyline he is telling, some of these games will indeed have elements of that to ensure that the video game fans are also being introduced to the wider universe, and this in theory should draw them into theaters. Now, the real question ultimately is, how many of the upcoming DC games will be solely DCU games, and how many of them will be standalone? I've seen multiple people make it pretty clear they don't want every single video game coming from Warner Bros. With DC characters to be tied to the DCU. So I do think they will pay attention to this, but really the main question is how many of those games will come, and how many will be tied or not tied to the overall story arc. This is pretty much the same question we have with animation and even films, and since we know Gunn is supportive of Elseworld titles, I don't think it's something to be worried about, but I also hope they don't get too bogged down in creating games that only support the primary storylines. Obviously, it's going to be a long time before we get any of these games. I don't suspect any DC video games anytime shorter than 2026 that tie to the overall DCU storyline. But we do have Wonder Woman, Multiverses, and Suicide Squad Kills the Justice League, so I don't think we're going to be bored. We're just going to have to be patient.